你一直在反省自己，想从错误中学习，但那可能正是你一直停在原地的理由。这是他花了30年看过无数个创办人后才理解的真相。过多的反思会让你产生恐惧，进而对巨大的机会视而不见。他甚至认为，不需要喜欢你的合作对象，也能打造出顶尖的成果。
My fault
想知道管理900亿美金的人是怎么看待人生教训的吗？本集告诉你。未来正在煮，我们开火上菜。
Now, I was running listening to every show that you've done before, and you recently said that you don't introspect and introspection is potentially overrated. I really struggled with this because I thought we learned from mistakes and I valued experience in that way. Can you help me understand the lack of value placed on introspection, and do we not learn from mistakes?
You know, we do learn from mistakes, but the problem is learning from mistakes sometimes it's good and sometimes it's bad, right? And if you just talk business for a moment, like in the venture mindset, this is a very big problem. There's a founder version of the mistake. There's a venture version of the mistake. The founder version of the mistake is if a founder starts a company in a category and the founder doesn't work, the founder is then emotionally angry at that category for the rest of his life. And will not acknowledge when there's something that's going to work in that category. And I've just seen that like over and over and over again. And that's fine because most founders go on to do other things, and that's fine and good, and it generally doesn't damage them from a business standpoint. In venture, the same thing happens. If you invest in a category, or if you invest in a kind of company, or you invest in a kind of founder, and it doesn't go well, it's extremely easy to learn from the mistake, right? And to basically say, all right, I touched that hot stove, I'm never doing it again. And then, you can tell me what happens next, right? Which is the next thing shows up and pattern matches, and it's the thing that you should invest in, and you have the chance to invest in, but you touch the scalded stove, and you're learning from your mistakes, right? You're doing the responsible thing, and so you don't do it. And so I think there's something that's particularly pernicious about learning from your mistakes in venture capital. And then I think that's also somewhat true about life. You get married multiple times, as they say, it's the triumph of hope over experience. Like, I think probably you want hope to triumph over experience in that domain. And I think there's a lot of other domains of life in which that's probably true.
What's your primal reason today for continuing to build Andreessen with the ferocity and ambition that you still have?
Well, of course, that would require introspection. So, I don't know if I'm going to give you
elegantly backing into it. Okay.
I don't know if I'm going to give you a great answer to that. I will tell you what I tell myself. I'll tell you what I tell myself is at this point, what I tell myself is I'm competing with myself, by which to say, like, I am trying to figure out how to be the best possible version of what I can be and what I can do. And so the way I think about it basically is like, okay, how good? Did you read? Was it Jocko Willink's book, Extreme Ownership? Did you ever come across that?
I love Jocko Willink. I also listen to his motivational talks when I go to the gym. Brilliant.
100%. And you know his thing on extreme ownership, right? Yeah. So this thing, for people who haven't heard, his thing on extreme ownership is just, and famous Navy SEAL commander, very, very, very accomplished guy, and the kind of guy people would happily follow into battle or would be a great CEO or great founder, that kind of personality. And he has this thing, he says extreme ownership, and he says, look, life just gets a lot simpler if you just assume everything is your own fault. Right. And it's just like, oh, I don't know, like, whatever, this LP didn't invest or this founder didn't take my money or whatever. It's like, oh, okay, it's my fault. It's not his fault. It's my fault. Clearly, I didn't do a good enough job. Clearly, I can do better. And then it basically, his argument is it gets you kind of productively focused on improvement. And so I found that, like, put it this way, when I'm in my own head and I'm mad about somebody doing something that I don't like, the number one stress relieving thing I can do is I can say, oh, that's my fault. Right? Because then it gives me ownership of the problem, and it gives me something that I can do. And then, by the way, it also drains away resentment, right? It means that I'm not resentful and angry at somebody else, right? Because I'm just like, okay, I'll just improve myself on that.
Do you need to like the founders you invest in, Marc?
So I say no. Opinions vary. I said earlier, I'm emotional both in good and bad ways. Like, you do end up getting very close to people, and you do end up wanting to have a high level of trust, and it certainly helps if you like each other and trust each other and so forth. But like, I would just say, on the other hand, like, some of the best founders in history, and look, I give you example after example in the distant past, they were not very likable people. And a lot of, by the way, the same thing is true of many of the great artists, many of the great filmmakers, many of the great, literary geniuses, many of the great philosophers, many of the great, by the way, political leaders, these people, but CEO, there's a lot of cases where these people are like not likable. And so I say no, you don't, because I think, like, if you're trying to fulfill your personal emotional needs at work, like I think that's a very fundamental problem, and you shouldn't try to do that. It's the Harry S. Truman quote: "If you need a friend, get a dog." Like the point, or another version of this is, we always say, "Do not bring your whole self to work." Like whatever you do not bring your whole self to work. Like if you show up and you're a professional and you're great to deal with and you're very productive and you add value in every engagement that you do, and if that's true for you as a VC and you're working with the founder and you're never friends, and you just like have a great working relationship, and you don't, and the company in the later years, whatever sells or whatever, and you never talk to each other again, like I've seen that work many times. And I think it's totally fine.
We're going to do a quick fire round, and we're going to start with an easy one. Adam Neumann and Flow was a controversial deal. Why did you do it? What was the thinking behind it?
So at the height of the WeWork meltdown, when it was in the newspaper every single day, reaching its endpoint, I talked to a friend of mine who is one of the legends of the real estate world, who I won't name, but is a very, very credible, very famous real estate guy. And he said, look, he's like, whatever people say about this whole thing, he said, look, there are only two people in the history of the world who have built compelling brands where people care about the brand, care about the name on the building for commercial real estate in the history of the entire world. And he said, one of them is President of the United States, and the other is Adam Neumann. And so he said, people need to understand, like, yeah, this is not like whatever this one's going sideways now, but like this guy is like a generational or all-time talent in that industry, at doing that. And of course, not just the brand, but like the value, the value proposition, like the thing that's underneath that. And so that really stuck with me, right? Because then that was up against the absolute wall of negativity, right, at the time, where people were just tripping all over themselves to just say the worst possible things they could about the guy. And then we got to know him after that, and as you know, like became thoroughly convinced or reinforced our view that he was a generational talent, and I think we feel very strongly that is the case, and we're very happy with that investment.
What was the most controversial deal or most disagreed upon deal internally from your memory?
I don't think we've had individual deals that are really controversial internally, because so the deal we kind of make with all of our investing partners is they all get to take risk. So they all get to go out on a limb and do the things that other people are going to think are dumb. And so they don't generally like backbite each other on that. So I don't think it's really that as much. The bigger issue, I think, is probably more, and I put this more on Ben and me than anybody else, but it's just like, okay, what are the kinds of investments that we do? Like what sectors are in and out of the strike zone, right? And I'll give you an example. I mean, the most straightforward example is the deal we didn't do. We should have done is the Anduril Series A. Right, which was just like sort of obvious that it was going to be special, and Palmer, we had worked with Palmer at Oculus, and it was just and his colleagues were clearly very capable, and it was just kind of obvious that there was something very special. But it was just like at the say like the politics, the cultural elements of that at the time when it first came around, I would say we got scared off in a way that I very much regret. And so you'll notice that like we are now extremely enthusiastic investors in defense tech and in things involving law enforcement, national security, public safety, and say 100% we would not make that same mistake again. And so I think it has to do with us actually. You see what I'm saying? It's risk taking at the conceptual level beyond the level of an individual company, and then like I said, it's generally Ben and me when we screwed that up.
You sit down with your kids and you can tell them one thing that you think would make them the most proud about what you've done. What would that one thing be?
Its impact on the world, and it's in the form of what I described earlier, with the idea of the economic idea of consumer surplus, but conceptually it's just like, wow, like stuff that I worked on or built or helped build is something that's really like it's all over the world, and people all over the world are using it, and it's been tremendously on net tremendously beneficial. I think that's one. And then look, the other that I think rises in importance over time is just the number of people that hopefully I've been able to have a positive impact on. So the number of people who I've been able to help or support or help get through hard times or teach different things to, who've been on gone on to be very successful. And I think as time's passing, it's more of that second category.
Penultimate one. What was the most memorable first founder meeting you've ever had? Not the best founder or anything like that, just the most memorable first founder meeting.
First meeting with Mark Zuckerberg. It was amazing. Mark's like 19 or whatever. And it was Mark and Sean Parker. And I knew Sean a little bit, but not well. And I'd never met Mark before. And Sean talked the entire time. Sean literally talked the entire time. It was just talked a mile a minute, every idea. It was just absolutely amazing. And Marc didn't talk, and Sean. So Sean and I basically talked the whole time, and Marc sat and listened. And I walked away and I was just like, wow, that was really weird. I was like, one of two things has happened here. Like either he's completely unsuited for the job, because like he literally doesn't talk, or he's like listening and absorbing everything that people are saying around him, and he's going to be on a vertical learning curve like crazy, because he doesn't have the ego need to just like say things. He can just like absorb, and of course it turned out to be number two, which is, and I've talked about this before. Like he's just on this incredible learning curve and has been his entire life in the most like amazing way. But yeah, I would say that one. I've never told that story before, but that was memorable.